The NFL season is right around the corner, and what I mean by that is we're at the point where we could all agree that for the most part, 80% of the roster transactions that need to be done have been made. The only marquee free agents that are remaining are Jadeveon Clowney and Everson Griffin and Antonio Brown, but don't get me wrong, there's some great talent available, but for the most part, we could all agree that the main roster transactions have been made. The NFL draft has come and gone, and more or less, we understand what the makeup of each and every team is going to be. With that being said, in this video, we're going to be ranking each and every NFL team based off of how they are as a team overall. Now, I'm sure some of you guys are going to disagree with some of my picks here. So before we get started, I want you guys to take a moment and comment who you think the best team in the NFL is going into the season and the team to beat is, and who you think the worst team in the NFL is going to be this season and is probably the most likely candidate to have the #1 overall pick and the ability to draft Trevor Lawrence. Before we jump into the content, guys, we are almost at 70,000 subscribers. We are on a mission to get to 100,000 subscribers on this channel before the new NFL season. If we are able to reach that goal, I'm going to be doing a huge giveaway on my Instagram account. I'm probably going to be giving away an Xbox Series X or a PS5 because I know a lot of you guys are going to want that. So please make sure to subscribe, turn on my notifications, and drop a like to help this channel grow. Without further ado, break! Mic check 1 2 1 2. Let's get started. At number 32, I have none other than the Washington Redskins. Now, don't get me wrong, I think the Redskins could do way better than this potentially, but based off of how their roster is currently, they have the most developing that they have to do of their new team. Of course, they brought in a defensive-minded head coach in Ron Rivera, and they have a very nice combination of Chase Young, Montez Sweat, and Ryan Kerrigan, so the Dallas Cowboys should be kind of fearful of this pass rush trio. So should the Philadelphia Eagles and the New York Giants, but there are still a lot of questions that need to be answered. Is Dwayne Haskins the future at the quarterback position for the Washington Redskins? And that's a pretty big question. I feel like the Redskins will give Haskins about 2 years to prove himself. They have Terry McLaurin, who was extremely promising last year. There's a good chance that the Redskins could prove us wrong at this listing. At number 31, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars, and man, I think there's no head coach more likely to get fired this season than Doug Marrone. You have to understand, it's not Doug Marrone's fault that Jalen Ramsey, Calais Campbell, AJ Boye, Marcel Darius, and Nick Foles are now all gone. But you could make an argument that it is his fault that the Jags only won 11 games and lost 22 games since the AFC Championship game versus the New England Patriots in 2017. There's a nice young nucleus on the defensive side of the ball. Sure, there's no Jalen Ramsey, but you have Josh Allen, Calais Cason, Miles Jack, and CJ Henderson. And if they hit on CJ Henderson and Calais Cason, then there's a good chance that we could see this defense become a top 10 defense. But at the very worst, you tank and Gardner Minshew sucks, and you're in a position to draft Trevor Lawrence next season. At number 30, I have the most enigmatic team in the entire NFL, and that is the New York Giants. They just hired a special teams coach named Joe Judge, and so could Joe Judge be the next coming of John Harbaugh? That's what they're hoping for. New York allowed the 30th most points per game last year. They gave up a passer rating of 101.4, and their defense was absolutely laughable. Now, they do have a new defensive coordinator as well in Patrick Graham, not to mention that you still have one of the most electric, if not the most electrifying running back in the entire NFL in Saquon Barkley, and the Giants are destined to do better than they did last season. At number 29, I have the Carolina Panthers, who is the next enigmatic team in the entire NFL, as they are now ready to transition from the Cam Newton era to the Teddy Bridgewater era, and there's a lot of players that are now gone that used to be familiar faces from the Ron Rivera era. For example, Greg Olson's gone, Luke Kuechly is retired, but there are still some mainstays on that Panthers roster. For example, Christian McCaffrey still looks like a monster. The issue for the Panthers isn't really the offensive side of the ball. It's the fact that they used to be 100% dependent on their defense, and now their defense is kind of a shell of their former self, and they have to rebuild it. It's more or less the same scenario that the Giants are dealing with. They're going to have to score a lot. At number 28, we have the New York Jets. And let's just forget about the fact that the whole Jamal Adams situation is an absolute poop fest. Let's forget the fact that, I don't know, a lot of players seem not to get along with Adam Gase. Le'Veon Bell, for instance. But let's just assume that we trust in Adam Gase fully. Well, Sam Darnold seemed to have improved last season, and he didn't really get an opportunity to go through a full training camp because he was dealing with mononucleosis. But they had a very, very good offseason and a phenomenal draft. Of course, Darnold's going to need Denzel Mims and Chris Herndon to do work if they want to be successful this season. I guess the biggest question that remains is how the Jets are going to handle this Jamal Adams situation, because of course he's one of their best players, and honestly the way Joe Douglas plays the Jamal Adams situation is going to have waves throughout his entire career. At number 27, we have the Cincinnati Bengals, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they surprised everyone and somehow snuck into the wild card. And this is what I consider to be Zach Taylor's true first year as a head coach. He's going to have a healthy AJ Green. He's going to have Tyler Boyd. He's going to have John Ross. But on top of John Ross, they also went ahead and drafted T. Higgins, not to mention that they drafted Joe Burrow with the #1 overall pick, and you already have Joe Mixon. So this team has a tremendous ceiling, and I wouldn't be surprised if they somehow snuck into the wild card. At the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if this team only won 5 games. It's one of those teams where the roster looks phenomenal, but could they all put it together to make a deep run? At number 26, I have the Detroit Lions, and this is a huge year for Detroit because Matt Patricia so far is 9-22-1 as the Detroit Lions head coach. They finished last in the division over the last 2 years. Matthew Stafford has been in Detroit for 12 seasons since being the first overall pick in the 2009 NFL draft, and they haven't exactly been winning playoff games since Stafford has arrived. Stafford is now 32 years old. They've literally wasted his prime away. He's got a really good wide receiver group. Kenny Golladay is one of the most promising receivers in the entire NFL. Matt Patricia was brought in because he was known to be a defensive genius, but after allowing 24.5 points a game in his first 2 seasons, that's not really what the Lions expected. So this is a very make or break season for Matt Patricia. At number 25, we have the Atlanta Falcons, and bro, this one's very, very simple. The Falcons have not been the same since Tom Brady came back 28-3 in the Super Bowl. They did bring in some beautiful new free agents, mainly Dante Fowler, who is 5 years removed from being the 3rd overall pick in the NFL draft. They reached for a cornerback from Clemson named AJ Terrell, so hopefully he could replace Desmond Trufant's production. All in all, we just got to see which version of the Atlanta Falcons we're going to be getting, because this team has not been the same since Kyle Shanahan left to join the San Francisco 49ers. Can Julio Jones and Matt Ryan turn up again? We'll have to wait and see. Another team that's in a very similar position is at number 24, the Cleveland Browns. Last season, it seemed like the Browns were ready to finally change the narrative surrounding their franchise. They took Baker Mayfield 2 years ago. He seemed like the real deal in his rookie year, and they were all in on giving him the tools he needed to succeed, even hiring the coach that he vouched for, which was Freddie Kitchens. Unfortunately, Freddie Kitchens had a Lamborghini man, and he did not know how to drive stick shift. He was not able to get them where they needed to be, despite having Odell Beckham Jr., Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt as Nick Chubb's backup, Jarvis Juice Landry, and not to mention an absolutely ferocious defense that featured the likes of Sheldon Richardson, Olivier Vernon, Myles Garrett, Demarius Randall, and Jamie Collins. Now, look, for all you know, this could be the season. If Kevin Stefanski is the real deal, then I feel like the Browns can make it to the playoffs. But if he falls short, then of course we're going to see more of the same. At number 23, we have the Los Angeles Chargers, and look, this is another wild card. It really depends on how the quarterback situation plays out for the Chargers. if they have Tyrod Taylor start out and he does a decent job, then fantastic. There is a good chance that they put in Justin Herbert halfway through, and if Justin Herbert gets off to a tough start, which I'm predicting he does because he's a very raw quarterback, then of course don't expect the Chargers to get very far. But at the same time, they have a phenomenal running back in Austin Eckler. They have a very, very good defense that is led by the likes of Joey Bosa and Derwin James. So of course there is a ton of promise for this team, especially because they just brought in Chris Harris Jr. and they drafted Kenneth Murray in the first round as well. I can't believe this next team made it up this high, and that's the Houston Texans. The reason the Houston Texans are up this high is strictly because of Deshaun Watson and JJ Watt. After stripping their team and completely reforming what it appears to be, getting rid of the likes of Jadeveon Clowney last season and DeAndre Hopkins this last offseason while bringing in David Johnson, I'm really excited to see how that's going to pay off for the Texans on the gridiron. Now, it remains to be seen when they're going to be giving up on Bill O'Brien, but for now, it seems like they're going to be rolling with him. So I guess we're going to have to wait and see how Houston does. But for now, they're at the 22nd spot on my power rankings. At number 21, we have the New England Patriots. And again, it's really funny. The Patriots are literally in the same scenario that they were in 20 years ago, although I don't think their defense is nearly as good as it was 20 years ago. They're now just praying to the football gods that some quarterback comes out of nowhere and happens to be a Hall of Fame quarterback. And that quarterback is Jarrett Stidham. It's going to be interesting because this is the first time we get to see how good Bill Belichick truly is at rebuilding a roster. Was he lucky to have Tom Brady fall into his lap, or is he truly a football genius? We'll have to wait and see. And personally, I'm excited to see how it's going to turn out. At number 20, we have the Denver Broncos, who look to be the real deal this season. They had one of the best off seasons I've ever seen. They brought in Jarrell Casey and AJ Boye. They have Bradley Chubb already on the defensive line on the opposite side of Von Miller. They drafted Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler. They were able to sign Melvin Gordon to complement Phillip Lindsay. They already had Cortland Sutton and Deshaun Hamilton at wideout. Noah Fant looked to be the real deal at the tight end position. And that's before we get to this beautiful gem of a quarterback in Drew Lock. Don't be surprised if they win 12 games this season, man. That's their ceiling, and I cannot wait to see how the Broncos are going to perform this year. At number 19, we have the Miami Dolphins, who are in the midst of probably the most, honestly, respectable rebuild I've ever seen. They had the opportunity to tank last season, but they didn't take it. They opted to establish a winning culture instead. I think Brian Flores is the real deal at head coach. And I do think that they can make a deep run. They had a great offseason. Of course, I do feel like they overpaid for Byron Jones. They drafted Tua Tagovailoa, and I believe that they're holding Josh Rosen for ransom to make sure Bill Belichick doesn't get his hands on him. All in all, I wouldn't be surprised if this is a 7-win team. I wouldn't be surprised if they make it into the playoffs, but I do respect the rebuild that they are undergoing, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is a powerhouse of a team in a few years. At number 18, we have the Arizona Cardinals, and man, isn't this team exciting. They brought back Kenyon Drake, the most underrated running back in the entire NFL. They poached DeAndre Hopkins from the Texans. Kyler Murray seemed to have been the perfect number 1 overall pick, and they're looking like geniuses from moving on from Josh Rosen to Kyler Murray. And dude, he also has Larry Fitzgerald as one of his weapons. They were able to pick up Isaiah Simmons, a player that I had going in the top 4 of the NFL draft at the number 8 spot. And on top of that, they were able to circle around and pick up Josh Jones. They have the former Denver Broncos head coach Vance Joseph as their new defensive coordinator, and they still got Patrick Peterson. At number 17, we have the Chicago Bears, and we have to see how this is going to go because the Bears now got themselves Nick Foles. We don't know if Nick Foles is there to serve as a mentor to Mitchell Trubisky, who by all means, I really think he could use some mentorship, or if they got him to replace Mitchell Trubisky. We'll have to wait and see, but they also invested in their defense. They've been doing it since 2018 when they brought in Khalil Mack, and now they brought in Robert Quinn. I do believe in Matt Nagy as a head coach, and there's so much stuff that's left to be answered, so it really depends on how that goes. But this is one of those teams that's very boomer bust this season. They could either make it to the playoffs and make it to the NFC Championship, or or they could possibly be a contender for the top 5 pick in the NFL draft. At number 16, we have the Los Angeles Rams, and I really don't know how they made it this far. I think it's because I believe in Sean McVay as a head coach. Brandon Cooks is now gone. They are in a very, very tough spot because they're paying Aaron Donald and Jared Goff a lot of money. They just cut Todd Gurley, and they have to somehow pay Jalen Ramsey this season. I don't know how this is all going to translate for Sean McVay and the Rams, because at the same time, they're in one of the toughest divisions in the entire NFL. Their division is literally the Seahawks themselves, the reigning NFC champion San Francisco 49ers, and the Arizona Cardinals. Dude, I really think out of all those teams, the Rams are the worst team. But, I've just had them ranked up higher because, of course, on the field, they were better than the Cardinals last season, and I figured it's only fair to include them here. Obviously, this could change by the middle of the season, but I have tremendous faith in the culture Sean McVay has cultivated, so that's why they're here. At number 15, I have the Philadelphia Eagles, who are really, I think they had one of the strangest off seasons that I've ever seen. They drafted Jalen Reagor, who's literally compared to Nelson Aguilar after Nelson Aguilar left, and then in the second round, they drafted Jalen Hurts, a player that I guess they're thinking there's a good chance he's going to get some starting time because, Carson Wentz hasn't been exactly the picture of perfect health. So I guess it's a good move, and they're just accepting the reality that Carson Wentz could go out again. They traded for Darius Slay, which is a great pickup, considering the fact that the Dallas Cowboys are returning with 2 1,000-yard receivers and then drafting another receiver in the first round in CeeDee Lamb. But at the same time, you have one of the best play callers in the entire NFL. You have a phenomenal defense that's only getting stronger. So for all you know, this Eagles team could turn back the clock and make a huge run in the playoffs. At number 14, we have the Indianapolis Colts, and how far this team goes is 100% dependent on Phillip Rivers. Now, they already had one of the best young defenses in the entire NFL. They had Darius Leonard on the defensive side of the ball, and on the offensive side of the ball, they had Quentin Nelson. They drafted Jonathan Taylor to join Marlon Mack, and if Phillip Rivers goes back to being, the Phillip Rivers of 2 years ago, this could be a pretty good season for the Colts. And if not, well, you're in position to draft Trevor Lawrence next season. At number 13, we have the Buffalo Bills, who, I can't believe it, they're good again. It's nuts. Josh Allen is turning out to be probably the player out of his entire draft class that is developing the best year after year. Now, I know that's controversial to say because this is the same draft class that produced Lamar Jackson, but you have to understand, in year one, Josh Allen looked like a complete raw, bare-bones quarterback. He's coming back in year 2 and got even better, and I predict that he's going to get even better and better, and that's before we mention how great that Buffalo defense is. So I believe in this team. I finally believe in what Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott are doing, and I can't wait to see what they're going to do because they're now the best team in their division. At number 12, we have the Green Bay Packers, and honestly, if off-the-field issues don't sabotage them this season, then I think there's a good chance that they can make a good run once again. Of course, there's the drafting of Jordan Love that does kind of cast a dark shadow over this organization. There was some rumors of tension between Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers, but at the end of the day, man, the same team for the most part is returning. They have Devontae Adams and the great Equanimeous St. Brown. It would have really been nice to see the Packers at least draft T. Higgins or Michael Pittman or something for Aaron Rodgers, but it is what it is. So they made it to the NFC Championship last season. We'll have to wait and see how far they get this season. At number 11, we have the Minnesota Vikings. They're returning after trading Stephon Diggs and a 7th rounder to Buffalo for a 1st, a 4th, a 5th, and a 6th round draft pick, then drafting Justin Jefferson to replace him. I honestly think that was a great decision because I didn't think paying Stephon Diggs that amount was very worth it. But they did lose Everson Griffin. They did lose Xavier Rhodes and Trey Waynes and Mackenzie Alexander. So we'll have to wait and see how good they are on the defensive side of the ball. But on the offensive side, especially if Dalvin Cook returns on time, I think they're going to be fine. At number 10, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers, and hopefully Ben Roethlisberger is going to return and everything's going to go back to normal. They do have Minkah Fitzpatrick, which is an amazing player in of itself, and that trade seemed to be very worth it last season. They were able to pick up Eric Ebron and draft a very promising wide receiver in Chase Claypool to put alongside Juju Smith-Schuster. If they're able to get the same exact production from James Conner as they did 2 years ago, then this team should be able to sneak into the AFC playoffs. At number 9, we have the Dallas Cowboys. And a lot of people have been asking me how I think the Cowboys are going to do this season because they know I'm a diehard Cowboy fan. And stop making fun of me. It's a very hard life, okay? Like, feel bad for me. Literally, could you, stop? Don't abuse Cowboy fans, man. We go through enough as is. I don't think in my entire life I've ever seen the Cowboys make it to the Super Bowl. I'm 26 years old, all right? So the last time they won a Super Bowl, I was in diapers. So, look, they let Byron Jones walk. They let Robert Quinn go. They had 2 very good wide receivers, and then they drafted another wide receiver, which I know at the time we were all excited because, of course, CeeDee Lamb, very sexy pick, but we didn't need him. Let's be honest. We drafted him just so the Eagles couldn't get his hands on him. Now you have Mike McCarthy at head coach, and really, the fate of the Cowboys are in Mike McCarthy's hands. If Mike McCarthy comes in and acts as if he is the second coming of Andy Reid, kind of like when Andy Reid left the Eagles and went to the Chiefs and created a brand new culture there, then yeah, the Cowboys are going to go very, very far. There's a lot of ifs here. Again, they have a beautiful roster, but they've always had a beautiful roster. They just never had a good coaching staff. Hopefully they made the right pick this season, and we'll have to wait and see. It's all on Mike McCarthy's shoulders because they do have the talent. It really depends if they could get the coaching in. At number 8, we have the Las Vegas Raiders, man. This team's going to be fun. I think John Gruden's successfully rebuilt this team. You have Darren Waller at tight end, who now has a mentor in Jason Witten, which in my opinion as a Cowboy fan, I think is really strange. You have Henry Ruggs and Tyrell Williams and Hunter Renfrow, phenomenal wide receiver core. You have Derek Carr at quarterback, and you have a great developmental quarterback in Marcus Mariota. You also have Carl Nassib and Corey Littleton and Prince Amukamara on the defensive side of the ball. So I can't wait to see them all put this together and finally make that run. It's year 1 in Vegas. Let's see how they started off. At number 7, we have the Tennessee Titans, who are out to prove that their last season wasn't a fluke. Of course, they have Derrick Henry returning, but they did lose Jarrell Casey. They still have Daquan Jones and Jeffrey Simmons. They did lose Marcus Mariota, but they didn't really value him much. So let's see how it's going to go this season. At number 6, we have the Seattle Seahawks, and I always say, if you have Russell Wilson underneath the center position, man, you're good, honestly. I don't know if Jadeveon Clowney's going to come back, but they did bring back Bruce Irvin. They do have DK Metcalf still, and they're rumored to be chasing Antonio Brown, or they're probably going to bring back Josh Gordon. All in all, if you have number 3 underneath the center position, then you're good in my opinion. At number 5, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a team whose defensive line features Shaq Barrett, Ndamukong Suh, and Jason Pierre-Paul, and who has Tom Brady underneath the center position, who's complemented by the best wide receiver duo in the entire NFL, and Rob Gronkowski. I don't really need to say anything further. I think that's all you really have to know. At number 4, we have the San Francisco 49ers, who are out for revenge this season. Now, here's the thing. They're even better this season than they were last season. They reloaded. They have Trent Williams replacing Joe Staley at left tackle. They traded DeForest Buckner for the 13th pick in the NFL draft, and then drafted Javon Kinlaw, which is a good cost-saving move. They drafted Brandon Ayuk as well, and they still have Richard Sherman. And Jimmy Garoppolo seems to be a pretty freaking good QB, and not to mention Kyle Shanahan is an offensive genius. At number 3, you have the New Orleans Saints, who are returning with Drew Brees, Jameis Winston as their backup QB, adding Emmanuel Sanders to the fold, and bringing back Malcolm Jenkins. So again, I always think the New Orleans Saints are a good lock to make it to the Super Bowl so long as they have Drew Brees underneath the center. But at the same time, you have to understand that, well, this is a team that always loses in the playoffs due to some sort of misfortune. I hope they prove otherwise this season. At number 2, we have the Baltimore Ravens, and I feel like Lamar Jackson's learned a lot since his first campaign into the playoffs, and that's what it seems to be. Of course, they lost Marshall Yanda, and that's going to hurt a little bit, but they brought in Calais Campbell on the defensive side of the ball. They still have Hollywood Brown, and their offense was the top-ranked offense last season. They drafted J.K. Dobbins as well, so that should be an interesting combination with Mark Ingram. And at number 1, who else but the defending Super Bowl champions, the Kansas City Chiefs. They're coming back with the same team for the most part, only they drafted Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So that's another toy from Mahomes and Andy Reid to play with. Let's be honest, man, Mahomes is one of the most transcendent talents we have seen in NFL history, and we should just sit back and watch because his career has been amazing so far, and I can't wait to see what he does next. Now, let me know if you agree with this list, man. I know that it was a very long list, and if you're cool with longer videos like this, please let me know in the comment section down below. If you made it to the end of this video, comment Mike Check 1212 in the comment section down below so I can show you some love. Aside from that, I'm your boy Microphone, and I'll catch you guys in our next upload.